Hello everyone. In today's video I bring you a story that will shake your beliefs and leave you speechless. Let's meet Grace Halstead, a 45-year-old geologist who was a staunch atheist, always believing only in science and completely rejecting the idea of God. But everything changed drastically when she went through a near-death experience that shattered her deepest certainties. She returned from the other side with a shocking revelation about the existence of God. What Grace experienced will challenge everything you thought you knew about life after death. So, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because this story will captivate you from beginning to end. Get ready for a journey that will change your perspective forever. Hello, my name is Grace Halstead, and I'm here to share with you an experience that completely changed my life and the way I see the world. I'm 45 years old, and until recently, I was a successful geologist, dedicated to science and rationalism. I grew up on a farm in the countryside, where I had always felt a special connection to nature from a young age. However, my Catholic family didn't understand this perception, which made me feel disconnected from spirituality from an early age. Today, I stand before you as a transformed person, someone who went through a near-death experience that challenged everything I believed to be true. This is my story, told firsthand, about how I, a skeptical and materialistic scientist, was confronted with a reality that goes beyond what our eyes can see and what science can explain. My journey began on that farm, where I would spend hours exploring the fields, feeling the earth beneath my bare feet, observing the changing seasons. I remember being amazed by every small detail: the morning dew on flower petals, the buzzing of bees on summer afternoons, the smell of approaching rain. It was as if I could feel the pulse of the earth itself. But whenever I shared these feelings with my family, I received confused looks. My parents, devout Catholics, tried to teach me about God through church rituals and Bible stories. But to me, that seemed distant and abstract compared to the connection I felt in nature. As I grew older, this disconnect between my personal experience and my family's beliefs deepened. I felt like an outsider, unable to find my place. That's how I began my search for answers, a journey that would take me from blind faith to extreme skepticism, and finally to an understanding that transcends both. What I'm about to share with you is more than just a story of life and death. It's a narrative of transformation, of breaking paradigms, of expanding consciousness. It's a testimony that there is more to existence than our senses can perceive or our rational minds can comprehend. Prepare yourselves for a journey beyond the limits of what we consider reality. My journey into disbelief began at the age of 15. I clearly remember the day I read in the newspaper about yet another scandal involving the church. It hit me like a punch in the gut. How could people who preach the word of God commit such terrible acts? And it wasn't just that. Around me, I saw so much injustice and so much pain in the world. Where was God in all of this? I began to question everything I had been taught. Every Sunday at church became an exercise in doubt and discomfort. The priest's words sounded hollow. The prayers seemed to echo into a void. Gradually, I distanced myself from the faith I once thought I had. It was as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes, and I saw the world in a completely new way. I remember staying up late, reading about different religions and philosophies, desperately searching for something that made sense. But the more I read, the more skeptical my conclusions became. The contradictions and conflicts between different beliefs only reinforced my growing conviction that it was all a human construct. My parents noticed the change. They tried talking to me, taking me to spiritual retreats. They even introduced me to a priest they thought could answer my questions. But none of it worked. Every attempt to reconnect me with faith only drove me further away. The breaking point came when I was 17. It was Easter, and the whole family was gathered for Mass. Sitting in the church pew, looking at the crucifix, I felt a deep sadness. Not because of the crucifixion story, but because I realized I no longer believed in any of it. In that moment, I decided I couldn't pretend anymore. The next day, I announced to my parents that I wouldn't be going to church anymore, It was a difficult conversation, full of tears and misunderstanding. My mother was devastated, my father furious. But I was determined. I declared myself an atheist, convinced that science was the only truth I could trust. In the years that followed, I threw myself into my scientific studies. Physics, chemistry, biology, these became my new scriptures. The scientific method was my new gospel. I had found a new purpose, a new way to understand the world. Or so I thought. My passion for science led me to study geology at university. There, I found new meaning. I dove headfirst into my studies, fascinated by the Earth's history written in rocks. Each layer I studied was like a page from an ancient book, revealing secrets of past eras. I remember the thrill of holding my first fossil during a field expedition. It was an ammonite, a mollusk extinct for millions of years. Holding that petrified shell, I felt a deep connection to the Earth's past. It was as if I could feel the weight of time in my hands. After graduating, I started my career with enthusiasm. I worked on various projects, from oil exploration to climate change studies. My life was guided by logic and the scientific method. There was no room for supernatural beliefs or spiritual ideas. I gently mocked colleagues who talked about astrology or crystal energy. To me, everything had a rational explanation. My professional success only reinforced my convictions. I published articles in renowned scientific journals, presented my work at international conferences. Each achievement was a confirmation of the power of science. I was a staunch atheist, proud to base my life on rationalism and materialism. The idea of life after death or any type of spirituality seemed absurd. After all, I dedicated my life to exploring the Earth's physical layers. How could I believe in something I couldn't see or measure? The universe, to me, was a vast mechanism governed by immutable physical laws. There was no room for miracles or divine intervention. I remember a conversation I had with a colleague during an expedition to the Grand Canyon. He talked about how the grandeur of that landscape made him feel small and led him to think of God. I replied that, for me, the true wonder lay in understanding the geological processes that formed those rock layers over millions of years. I lived in a world of facts and data, of testable theories and observable evidence. My mind was closed to anything that couldn't be proven in a lab or measured with instruments. Little did I know that the universe was about to show me that there was much more beyond what I could see or touch. At 42, my life seemed perfect on the outside, but inside, I was falling apart. My 15-year marriage to Jonathan was coming to an end. There were no big fights or betrayals. We simply drifted apart. It was as if we were two strangers living in the same house. The separation was amicable, but painful. I remember the night we finally admitted our marriage was over. We were sitting at the kitchen table, untouched cups of coffee in front of us. The silence was deafening. Jonathan was the first to speak. "Grace, I think we both know this isn't working." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. It was the end of an era, the closing of a chapter in my life that I thought would last forever. During that time, I began to question many things. My job, which once gave me so much satisfaction, now seemed empty. I spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if there was more to life than what I could see and touch. But I quickly brushed those thoughts aside, considering them emotional weakness. At work, I threw myself into increasingly challenging projects, trying to fill the void I felt. But even the most exciting discoveries didn't seem to satisfy me. It was as if I was running on a treadmill, always moving, but never getting anywhere. My colleagues noticed the change. "Grace, are you okay?" they often asked. I always responded with a forced smile and an excuse about being tired. But the truth was I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. One night, sitting alone in my newly rented apartment, I found myself looking at a photo of Jonathan and me taken years ago during a trip to Iceland. We were smiling, happy, with a majestic glacier in the background. Tears started rolling down my face. They weren't just tears for the end of my marriage, but for something deeper that I couldn't name. It was in this state of mind that I decided to go for a bike ride in Boulder, Colorado. I needed to escape, to clear my head. Autumn was beginning, the leaves on the trees changing color. The fresh mountain air seemed to promise a new beginning. Little did I know that ride would change my life in a way I could never have imagined. Everything happened so fast. I was riding along the winding road, absorbed by the beauty of the autumn landscape around me. The mountains rose majestically on the horizon, their slopes painted in shades of red, orange, and gold. The crisp morning air filled my lungs, and for a brief moment, I felt alive and free. Suddenly, I heard the screech of tires on asphalt. A car came out of nowhere, skidding around the curve. I saw the shiny metal speeding toward me. My heart raced. Adrenaline flooded my system. I tried to swerve, but there was no time. There was nowhere to go. The impact was brutal. I felt my body being thrown from the bike. The world spun around me in a blur of colors and shapes. There was pain, a flash of intense light, and then darkness. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on the cold, hard asphalt. I couldn't move. The pain was indescribable, as if every nerve in my body was on fire. I tried to breathe, but each breath was agony. I tasted the metallic flavor of blood in my mouth. Worried voices were speaking around me, but I could barely understand them. It was as if they were far away, muffled by a constant buzzing in my ears. Someone held my hand, telling me to stay calm. That help was on the way, but I couldn't calm down. Panic was taking over me. The ambulance sirens grew closer and closer. I tried to speak, to ask what had happened, but no sound came out. My vision was blurry, but I could see concerned faces leaning over me. Paramedics, I assume. I felt myself being carefully moved onto a stretcher. Each movement sent waves of pain through my body. I heard fragments of conversation, multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding, head trauma. The words penetrated my foggy consciousness, increasing my fear. As I was being carried into the ambulance, I looked up at the sky. The bright blue contrasted strangely with the chaos around me. A terrible thought occurred to me. I might die. I, who had always denied the existence of God or life after death, now faced the real possibility of dying. Fear completely consumed me. The ambulance door closed, and I began my journey to the hospital. A journey that would change everything I believed about life, death, and what exists beyond. In the ambulance, on the way to the hospital, panic took hold of me. The idea of simply ceasing to exist was terrifying. All those years of scientific certainty disappeared in an instant. The science I valued so much could not comfort me at that moment. Every bump in the ambulance sent waves of pain through my body, reminding me of the fragility of my existence. The paramedics worked frantically around me, checking my vital signs, administering medication. I heard fragments of their conversations, words like critical and unstable, penetrating my foggy consciousness. I remember thinking about all the things I would leave behind, my unfinished work, the books I hadn't read, the trips I hadn't taken. But more than that, I thought about the people, my parents, friends, even Jonathan. Would there be something after this? Or would it just be the end? A tear ran down my face. A paramedic noticed and held my hand, saying comforting words that barely registered. I wanted to scream, to beg them not to let me die, but no sound came out. When I arrived at the hospital, the doctors were talking about emergency surgery. I heard words like internal bleeding and spinal damage. Each word heightened my terror. As they prepared me for surgery, I was silently pleading. To whom or to what, I didn't know. I just knew I didn't want this to be the end. In the operating room, the bright lights momentarily blinded me. The smell of antiseptic was strong, almost nauseating. Doctors and nurses moved quickly around me, their voices tense and focused. Someone briefly held my hand, saying everything would be okay. As the anesthesia began to take effect, my mind wandered back to my childhood on the farm. I remembered the smell of freshly cut grass, the sound of crickets at night, the feeling of the warm sun on my skin. I thought about how I used to feel connected to something greater when I was in nature. What happened to that connection? My thoughts became hazy, consciousness slipping away. A primordial fear overtook me, the fear of the unknown, of the void. I, who had always sought answers in science, was now facing the greatest unknown of all. My last conscious thought was a question. If I died now, what would be left? Had my life meant anything? Had I left any positive mark on the world? And then, the darkness enveloped me. But it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I believed about reality, consciousness, and the very nature of existence. And then, it happened. During the surgery, something extraordinary occurred. Suddenly, there was no more pain, no more fear. I found myself floating above the operating table, looking down at my own body. The doctors were working frantically, but I felt at peace. It was a surreal sensation. I could see every detail of the operating room with incredible clarity. The focused expressions of the surgeons, the shine of the instruments, the frantic rhythm of the heart monitors. But it all seemed distant, as if I was watching through a window. In the blink of an eye, I was transported to a place of indescribable beauty. It was a spiritual landscape, serene and peaceful. Majestic mountains rose in the distance, their snow-capped peaks glowing under a golden light. Fields of flowers stretched as far as the eye could see. It was as if every atom of my being was vibrating in harmony with the universe. At that moment, all my scientific certainties, all my skepticism, simply dissolved. I was experiencing something that defied everything I believed was possible. It was real, more real than anything I had ever lived. I began to move through this ethereal environment. I wasn't walking or flying, but simply wishing to be in a place and instantly finding myself there. Every movement revealed new wonders, waterfalls of light, crystalline structures that seemed to sing, beings of pure energy radiating kindness. Time didn't seem to exist there. It could have been a minute or 1,000 years. I couldn't say. I was immersed in a sense of eternity, where past, present, and future merged into a single moment of pure existence. Amid all this beauty and peace, I felt a presence approaching. It was a welcoming energy, full of wisdom and compassion. When I turned to face it, I saw a female figure bathed in golden light. Her name was Lydia, though I couldn't explain how I knew that. She smiled, and her smile contained all the love in the universe. "Welcome back, Grace," Lydia said, her voice melodic and comforting. I was confused. "Back? I've never been here before." Lydia laughed softly. "Oh dear, you've been here many times. This is your true home. Life on Earth is just a small part of a much greater divine plan." As we talked, Lydia explained to me that the purpose of our existence goes far beyond material life. Every experience, every relationship, every challenge we face on Earth has deep meaning for the growth of our soul. "But what about science?" I asked, still holding on to the last remnants of my old self. Everything I studied, everything I believed to be true. "Science is a wonderful tool, Grace," Lydia replied gently. "It helps us understand the workings of the physical world. But there is so much more to the universe than the eye can see or instruments can measure. True wisdom lies in recognizing that there are mysteries beyond our current understanding." Lydia then led me along a path of light. As we walked, or rather floated, she showed me visions of the universe that challenged my comprehension. I saw galaxies being born and dying, entire civilizations rising and disappearing in the blink of a cosmic eye. "Look, Grace," Lydia said, pointing to a vast field of pulsating energy. These are all the souls that have ever existed and that will ever exist. They are all connected, all part of a great cosmic web of consciousness. I was in awe of the sight. It was as if I could feel each of those souls, their joys, their pains, their learnings. I understood then that we are never truly alone, that we are all part of something much greater. Lydia continued, "Your journey on earth, Grace, is just a chapter in a much longer story. You chose this life, these experiences, to learn specific lessons." "I chose?" I asked, perplexed. "Yes," Lydia smiled. "Your passion for science, your search for truth, even your doubts and skepticism. All of this is part of your path of spiritual growth." I remained silent, absorbing everything Lydia was telling me. It was as if a veil was being lifted, revealing a reality far vaster and more complex than I had ever imagined. Guided by Lydia, I went through an experience I can only describe as a life review. I saw scenes from my life unfold before me, not in a linear way, but as a mosaic of interconnected moments. I saw my childhood on the farm, the connection I felt with nature. I saw the moments of doubt in church, my decision to pursue science. Every choice, every interaction was shown with crystal clarity. The most remarkable thing was that I not only saw these moments, but I felt them. I felt the emotions of the people I had interacted with throughout my life. The joy of a colleague when I helped with a project. The hurt of my parents when I rejected their faith. The silent sadness of Jonathan in the final days of our marriage. "See how your actions affected others," Lydia said softly. "Every word, every gesture has an impact that goes beyond what we can see." I saw moments I was proud of, when I used my knowledge to help communities affected by natural disasters, when I inspired young students to pursue scientific careers. But I also saw moments I was ashamed of, when I was cruel to someone because of my skepticism, when I ignored others' emotional needs in the name of cold logic. "Don't judge yourself harshly," Lydia comforted me. "Every experience, positive or negative, contributed to your growth." The review continued, showing me patterns in my life that I had never noticed before. I saw how my pursuit of scientific truth was, deep down, a disguised spiritual quest, how my fear of death had shaped many of my decisions. "Do you understand now?" Lydia asked. "Your life on earth is a journey of learning. There are no mistakes, only lessons." I nodded, feeling a deep understanding settle within me. For the first time, I saw my life as a coherent whole, with each part contributing to my spiritual evolution. As the life review came to an end, I felt a profound peace and understanding. Part of me wanted to stay in that place of love and serenity forever. But Lydia looked at me with tenderness and said, "It's not your time yet, Grace. You have much to do, much to share." I felt myself being pulled back against my will. The light began to fade, and the feeling of peace was replaced by physical pain and confusion. I opened my eyes and found myself back in the hospital, surrounded by machines and surprised doctors. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Physically, I was recovering from severe injuries, but spiritually and emotionally, I was going through an even deeper transformation. How could I reconcile what I had experienced with my old beliefs? I practice meditation daily, seeking to reconnect with that sense of peace and universal love I experienced. My view on life, death, and human purpose is completely different. I haven't abandoned science. I still see it as a valuable tool for understanding the physical world. But now I recognize that there is much more to the universe than we can explain or measure. I share my story not to convert anyone, but to offer a different perspective. A perspective that says we are more than our physical bodies, that our actions have profound consequences, and that love is the most powerful force in the universe. My near-death experience taught me that life is precious, that every moment is an opportunity for growth and connection. Now I live each day with gratitude, seeking to spread love and compassion. And when I think of death, I no longer feel fear. I know it is not the end, but merely a transition to something beautiful beyond our current understanding. This is my story, my journey beyond life. A journey that continues every day, constantly reminding me of the interconnectedness of all things and the transformative power of love. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on notifications to watch each new video and help us spread this message to as many people as possible. See you next time.